People of Reddit who have gone through or are going through cancer, what was the first sign that made you go to the doctor? I had what I thought was a stroke and found out I have a glioblastoma. I was given 12 to 15 months and so far I've made it to the 15th month. Stay strong, my dude. My grandma was given 6 months for her lymphoma around the time I was born, nearly 29 years ago. I had coffee with her on Friday. My self-diagnosed IBS was actually a tumor and it hemorrhaged. Stage 4 rectal cancer. I beat that, but it is in my liver now, too big to operate. I am living my best life while I can. Man, I wish you good luck. I also diagnosed myself with IBS. What were your symptoms before the blood? I don't want this comment to get buried. Pro tip. If you ever have blood in your stool that is more than just scraping your asshole on some cheap toilet paper, you need to get this checked out by a doctor. You can get a bad anemia from it and it can be coming from a tumor, an erosion, or a polyp. Source: am an MD. Don't just write it off as ibs and ignore it. Please, please, please. Edit. Let me also say, don't take any of this as official medical advice. The main takeaway from what I have replied to many comments is that the peace of mind that you can get from finding out you don't have X condition is often well worth a history and physical exam and determination on the next diagnostic steps. Not everyone who goes in will need a CT scan and an EGD/colonoscopy. However, someone might, and they might come back clean, and oftentimes that can be as well worth the process as finding something definitive. Doctors are well trained in deciding how and when to work someone up, but you never get the benefit of their training if you don't tell them your story. Every visit has a history and physical in it, and that's often the most important part. PSA: unintended weight loss or finding blood where you normally wouldn't. Get yourself to a doctor. What is it about tumors that causes these two symptoms? Cancer by definition causes a lot of dysregulated growth, so you lose weight because it's using up your energy/nutrients to grow, and it bleeds because part of that growth is it making its own blood supply to give it nutrients and oxygen. These vessels are numerous and abnormal, so they are more prone to bleeding. Making its own blood supply, and what a fact. Anytime your body grows, your circulatory system effectively expands to cover it. If you gain a bunch of weight, your body will create more blood vessels, so the new tissue can get nutrients and whatnot. If you get a tumor, blood vessels also grow in it because it will hijack some of those nutrients. As a little bit of trivia, one of the reasons that people who are obese tend to have heart issues is because they have more blood vessels to supply blood to. Their heart beats more and/or harder to compensate for pushing the blood in greater volumes. They can also experience coldness in their limbs despite having more fat because the blood has a harder time getting to their extremities. Our bodies are really cool but also kind of scary. I felt a pop in my back. It was actually a vertebra breaking. I had severe pain after, and was later diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a blood cancer. That was 5 years ago, and today I am in remission. I had a persistent pain in the middle of my sternum. Doctors thought it was costochondritis, essentially just inflammation of a joint. I stopped working out and lifting heavy things for 3 months, but it didn't go away. Eventually I started having night sweats and random aches. After I fractured my hip, I got an MRI and biopsy and they diagnosed me with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I got chemo and I've been in remission for 5 years. Edit: I'm seeing a lot of people describing a similar chest pain and getting scared. Not all chest pain is cancer and not all cancer is chest pain. I felt the pain in my chest because my tumor happened to be growing there. It could just as easily have grown somewhere else, and my story might have started with describing a persistent pain in the middle of my shin. If you're worried about something, Talk to your doctor. My dad had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It started as a tickle in his throat, and then he lost his voice. As in, he could not talk beyond the strength of a whisper. He chalked it up to a bad throat cold. 5 weeks later, and we finally got him to go to the hospital. Stubborn SOB that he was. Huge tumor put pressure on his vocal cords, which caused him to lose his voice, and have difficulties swallowing. He went for chemotherapy, made it through and was in remission for 7 years before it came back. Then chemotherapy, and radiation again. Then it came back in his pancreas where he had abdominal pain, and other difficulties but did not tell us. Listen to your body, please. As someone who has lost their loved one, if you suspect something is out of the ordinary, do not hesitate to bother the doctor about trivial shit. Be well. Take care, and all my best to you and your family. My sister had stage 4 non-Hodgkin's at 21 years old, and her only symptom was a persistent cough. Doctors kept telling her it was pneumonia or bronchitis and giving her cough syrup and antibiotics. 6 months after the cough started, my mum convinced her to go to a walk-in and demand a chest x-ray. She was admitted to the cancer center in Out City the next day for intense chemo. She had to be in the ICU while it was administered because the tumor was pushing on the tissue around her heart and they worried she would bleed out as the tumor shrunk. It'll be 20 years next February, and she has been cancer-free ever since. Married, has 3 kids, and you'd never know she was sick. She was super lucky, but now I'm paranoid every time I get a cough. My dad went to the ER after a big bump had formed on his neck overnight. He was prescribed severe rash medication but went back after nothing had worked. Everyone, even the doctors, thought it had been an allergic reaction or some kind of rash, but after testing for other causes, they found that he had had Hodgkin's lymphoma and a 6-inch mass in his chest. It has been over a year, he has finished treatment, and the cancer shows no sign of returning. Edit, thank you all so much for all the kind words and support. Seizures. I got seizures out of nowhere during the night. No history of seizures in my family. Got my head screened and they found what they thought to be a benign tumor. Anaplastic astrocytoma, diagnosed 2 months before my 22nd birthday. Nearing the 5-year mark, though, with no evidence of it returning. My dad was in bed one night and said he felt like he was drowning, then began coughing up blood. Ah, that's terrifying. What kind of cancer did he have? He had kidney cancer, but it had spread to his lungs. Is he okay? Well, he was diagnosed back in 2011. He just passed back in April. After he was diagnosed, he had to get surgery that removed about 1/3 of his lungs and his right kidney. After that, he was forced into retirement. For 6 months we struggled for money due to Social Security giving us issues, but once our financial situation stabilized and he was able to go with us to places like Disney World and Alaska. He got to travel around when he was feeling well and visit places he probably would have never been able to visit. Since he had terminal cancer, it was a slow decline, and over time he was able to do less and less. However, we are extremely lucky that he fought for so long and was able to see my sister get married and me graduate. Edit, I wanted to thank all of you who are sending prayers and sharing your stories. I really appreciate the support, and I hope those of you who also have similar experiences are doing well, staying happy in these difficult times. I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm glad it was a happy ending for the most part, with him getting to do things that he loved with the people he loved. My 33-year-old husband was diagnosed with inoperable glioblastoma, most aggressive brain cancer, in January 2019, when he was 31. What caused him to get a check was persistent headache that didn't go away with paracetamols and sleep. We discovered the tumors after taking an MRI. Needless to say, our lives were changed forever. Now we are at the end of our journey, and it's been a harrowing experience for me as his wife and caregiver. It's a lonely journey. I don't wish it upon anyone, and no one has any idea what glioblastoma is like, unless they have gone through it. The median survival time is 14 to 18 months. We are on our 18th month now. And given days/weeks left. Every day is a gift, and I'm glad I get to be holding his hands every day, even if he's resting and sleeping most of the time. As long as he is not in pain, and that the morphine patches are working, that is fine by me. I can't handle him going through any more pain. Edit. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, giving me strength and support, and I'm so blessed to even be receiving all of your kindness. It's such a touchy subject and I'm hurt all the time, but you guys being so kind, really makes me cry happy tears. I'm so touched. I don't know how to describe it, but I feel a little bit lifted. And that's more than I can ask for, from the internet. My husband, Victor, would have been so grateful to know that he is loved and supported by more people than he thought he was. Thank you, heart. Watched 2 aunts do with uncles and my mom go through this with my dad. Caregiving is exhausting mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Wishing you as much peace as you can find. Thank you. I'm taking it one day at a time. Some days easier, some days harder. It's the hardest, most painful thing I've ever gone through in my life. Watching him decline, in just a matter of months. More care should be provided for caregivers, especially mentally. I'm happy to hear your dad received the love and care that he deserved. It's all love. I was 17, getting ready for spring break back in 2010. Was making plans with my boyfriend on the phone because we were going to take his brothers to the zoo in a different city. Literally in seconds there's this big translucent blind spot in my eye that is orange. I can see dark shapes behind it, but it's super blurry. I figured I would just go to the eye doctor before I left the next day, but my sister, who actually works for the cancer center in my city, told me that I should go to the hospital because anything weird with your vision can be super serious. After 36 hours of emergency waits, driving to specialists, they finally admitted me to the eye ward for a bacterial infection. Then they took my blood for a routine blood test. Within an hour or so, as I was getting ready to sleep, a doctor and nurse come in. The nurse has a box of tissues. The doctor told me my blood is leukemic, to which I asked, okay, can I treat that? He was extremely unclear on what was happening. I was 17, my family had already left, and I had no idea about any cancers. I was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and started chemo that night after being transferred to a different hospital. They did a bone marrow biopsy the next morning and then sent it to a genetic lab in another province. When the test results came back, they changed my diagnosis to chronic myelogenous leukemia in the blast phase crisis, final stage, that was caused by the Philadelphia chromosome, where chromosomes 9 and 22 switch places and causes a mutation in my red blood cells. Told me I was the youngest person in the world with it, as CML usually takes a very long time to progress and the final stage doesn't show until around 65 years of age. That change in diagnosis changed my timeline. They had originally said 6 months to a year untreated, but now it was 1 to 3 months if I didn't get a stem cell transplant or bone marrow transplant. All this because I had blood clots happening all over my body because of the abnormalities of my red blood cell shapes, and the one in my eye presented itself in my vision since the vessels are so small. Edit. I guess I never finished off. I just celebrated 10 years in remission on June 17th this year and I'm healthy. My sister ended up being a 10/10 DNA marker match, and I was able to get a stem cell transplant on June 17th, 2010. Still immunocompromised and taking dasatinib every day, chemo pill, but able to live my life. COVID has been really worrisome for me, but I'm just trying to be as careful as possible. Thanks for all the comments. And P.S. I'm a female. The boyfriend was extremely supportive for a teenager, and we were together for 7 years before we parted ways mutually. Last year, March 2019, I, male, 35, woke up in the morning to go to the toilet. I was urinating pure, thick blood with little lumps in it. So after a severe panic attack, it began to hurt like hell. I was throwing up from the pain. After a day in the hospital and some scans and tests later, they told me to call my parents. So you know you're getting some bad news. It turns out it was kidney cancer. They removed my right kidney, fortunately no other treatments were needed, and I'm living the best life right now. If the tumor in my kidney didn't started to bleed, I would have found out much later, probably too late. My brother was 11 when he started experiencing symptoms. He started losing a lot of weight, and when he was playing soccer it looked like he was running through mud and couldn't keep up with everyone else. My parents took him to the pediatrician and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. One day, he woke up and couldn't stop throwing up. When he tried to run to the bathroom, he kept running into the door frame and couldn't walk straight. He said the lights were giving him a headache. We took him to the emergency room and they found that he had a brain tumor, and had emergency brain surgery the next day. We were extremely lucky that they decided to do a CAT scan at the ER, apparently they don't usually do them on kids. 2 brain surgeries and a year and a half of chemo later, and he is in remission now. As brutal as the therapy can be for kids and for how scary childhood cancer is in general, I will say I'm glad a lot of pediatric cancers have a good response rate to therapy when caught early. I'm happy your brother is doing well. I was about 12 and I noticed a grey spot in my left eye, so I went to the eye doctor. It turned out to be retinoblastoma. And fast forward about 1 week, I had my eye removed and started chemo. And now have a glass eye that has to get redone every 2 years until I was 16. On Christmas Eve 2018, my dad lost the ability to talk except for the phrase "this is crazy." Called paramedics because we thought he'd had a stroke. Got him to the hospital where the imaging showed a brain tumor on the outside edge of his brain. The swelling caused him to have a seizure. He was transferred to a bigger local hospital. They did full body scans because it's pretty rare to just have brain cancer, usually it's a secondary for another cancer site. We got lucky in that it was the sole spot. Went through a craniotomy and 5 rounds of high-dose inpatient chemo, and he's 1 year in remission. Thanks for the awards. What do you think of these stories? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more interesting videos.